There are moments in history when an entire empire trembles before the fury of a determined people. Imagine a massive rebellion sweeping through the heart of Roman Britain, fueled by a deep sense of injustice and carried forth by warriors who refused to kneel before a foreign power. This is the story of the legendary Battle of Watling Street, fought in 61 AD, where the British tribes made their stand against the might of the Roman Empire. In this sweeping saga, you will witness the unyielding courage of Queen Boudica, the strategic brilliance of Roman commanders, and the unforgettable clash of thousands of warriors as they write their names into the annals of ancient history. Will unstoppable spirit prevail over meticulous discipline, or will ironclad legions crush the dreams of liberty? Brace yourself for an epic voyage into the heart of one of Britain's most iconic revolts, and discover how a single stand on a dusty road became a defining chapter in the struggle for freedom. Let us begin by painting the canvas of Roman Britain, a land of misty hills, dense forests, and a patchwork of fiercely independent tribes long accustomed to ruling themselves. Before Rome arrived, the island was home to tribes that sometimes aligned in alliances, other times warred among themselves, but always recognized the land as their own. They cherished cultural traditions, revered gods in hidden groves, and lived close to nature's cycles. Their warriors displayed ferocity on the battlefield, an attribute that impressed even Caesar's legions when Julius Caesar first ventured onto the island a century earlier. But this time was different. Rome was no longer testing the waters. Rome had established its permanent foothold, determined to tame Britain and incorporate it fully into the empire. By 61 AD, the Roman presence in Britain was significant. Towns were being rebuilt in the Roman style. Long roads cut across the countryside, forging new commercial pathways and enabling the legions to march efficiently. Forts appeared like well-planned outposts, each bristling with armed Roman soldiers who enforced the laws of the emperor. Some British tribes accepted this new order and prospered by trading with Roman merchants, wearing Roman togas and adopting Roman customs. Others grumbled quietly, their liberties curtailed, their pride wounded, but they recognized the power of Rome and decided to wait. But there were those who refused to yield. Among them were the Iceni, led by a king named Suetonius. When he died, he left part of his kingdom to Rome, hoping to secure the safety of his family and maintain some independence for his people. But Roman officials saw this differently. Instead of honoring the Iceni's partial autonomy, they sought to seize everything. The oppression that followed lit the flames of resentment. Suetonius's widow, Queen Boudica, became the living embodiment of that rage. Boudicca was not a queen in the Roman sense. She was the matriarch of a fiercely proud tribe, chosen to guide and protect them, a leader whose authority was woven from respect and tradition rather than the trappings of imperial power. She was described by Roman historians as tall, terrifying in aspect, with a piercing stare and long hair that fell over her shoulders like a mane. These accounts may carry a degree of Roman sensationalism, but there is no question her presence was commanding. Her daughters were reputed to be at her side, solidifying the personal nature of the revolt. She was not merely fighting for the tribe's independence. She was avenging outrages committed against her people and her own family. The spark that ignited the conflagration of rebellion was Rome's harsh treatment of the Iceni after Suetonius's death. Lands were confiscated, nobles were whipped and disgraced. Boudicca herself, according to the ancient accounts, was publicly flogged. Her daughters were reportedly subjected to shameful abuse. This was more than political aggression. It was a deep personal violation that shook the tribe's social and moral foundations. The Iceni found themselves united by despair, and soon, despair turned to fierce determination. Other tribes, especially those already resentful of Roman interference, rallied to the Iceni's cause. The Trinovantes, who had witnessed the construction of a Roman colony upon their sacred lands at Camulodunum, modern Colchester, were among the first to join Boudicca. Together, they formed a formidable force, bound by fury and a longing to drive the Roman occupiers out. The sense of injustice that ran through the rebellious ranks cannot be overstated. For many, Roman rule was synonymous with heavy taxation, the loss of ancient rights, forced labor for building projects, and the overarching presence of a foreign legion that seemed to sap the native spirit. Fueled by these grievances and spurred on by Boudicca's leadership, the British warriors grew in both numbers and ferocity. Soon they banded into a massive mob that marched on Camulodunum, the Roman colony where veterans of the legions resided. The city, barely defended, was overrun. Buildings and temples erected in Roman style were put to the torch. Statues symbolizing imperial might were smashed. In the wake of the onslaught, the rebels left behind only scorched remains, a stark warning that the old ways of Britain would rise again. Word of Boudicca's revolt spread like wildfire, terrifying Roman administrators who had not anticipated such a massive rebellion. People in Londinium, modern London, and Verulamium, St. Albans, began to fear that the unstoppable British horde would strike next. The governor of Roman Britain, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, was on campaign in the west, subduing the Druids in Mona, Anglesey. Realizing the severity of the threat, he hurried his forces eastwards. Despite his best attempts to organize a defense, Paulinus was at a huge disadvantage. He had only a fraction of the Roman garrison under his direct control. Many legions were deployed elsewhere. To complicate matters, Roman officials found themselves cut off, terrified, and ill-prepared for the magnitude of the rebellion. Boudicca's forces did not rest. After capturing Camulodunum, they advanced on Londinium. Many inhabitants pleaded for Roman support, but Governor Paulinus recognized that he could not defend the city with his meager troops. He made the strategic decision to abandon Londinium, leaving it to its fate. Boudicca's army descended upon the settlement, unleashing chaos. According to Roman historians, the destruction was total. Another city, Verulamium, met a similar end. A trail of smoking ruins marked the triumphant arc of the rebellion. By this point, the Romans understood that half measures would not suffice. The only hope of preserving Rome's hold on Britain lay in confronting Boudicca with disciplined might, in a place that minimized the advantages of her enormous host. Suetonius Paulinus was a seasoned commander. He was aware that his legionaries, well-disciplined and heavily armed, stood a chance even if severely outnumbered, but only if the battle was fought on ground favorable to Roman tactics. He scoured the land for a location that would allow him to neutralize the rebels' numerical supremacy. That location turned out to be somewhere along the line of Watling Street, an important Roman road that stretched across Britain. Though the exact site of the battle remains uncertain to modern scholars, the historical accounts suggest it was a narrow gorge or defile with a dense forest at the rear. This geography would prevent Boudicca's vast host from encircling the smaller Roman force and force them into a bottleneck. Paulinus placed his back to the forest so that the Romans had no escape route, and so that the enemy could not outflank them. The open plain in front funneled the rebels straight into the disciplined legionary lines. On the morning of the decisive battle, Boudicca's forces arrayed themselves in their tens of thousands. Some estimates, likely inflated by Roman propaganda to glorify their own victory, placed the numbers of rebels as high as 200,000. Even if we discount Roman exaggeration, there is no doubt that Boudicca commanded a massive army. Proud warriors from multiple tribes, many accompanied by their families, who came to watch what they believed would be the final blow against the invaders. British chariots, a fearsome sight with scythed wheels, roamed across the front, while foot soldiers brandished spears and swords, roaring their battle cries. Meanwhile, the Roman legionaries formed up in tight ranks, each man clad in segmented armor, carrying a large rectangular shield and armed with the deadly pilum, javelin, and the gladius, short sword. Their officers paced confidently, maintaining strict discipline, reminding their men that they were the best soldiers in the known world, and that fortune favored the bold and the disciplined. Before the battle commenced, Boudicca addressed her warriors. Accounts suggest she spoke of freedom, honor, and vengeance. She reminded them of the outrages committed by Rome, urging them to fight as one people against a common foe. She invoked the spirits of their ancestors and the sanctity of their homeland. The sight of this imposing queen, defiant and fierce, further inflamed the spirits of her followers. The Britons believed their cause was just. They believed the gods were with them. In their eyes, there was no doubt that the legions would be swept away. But the Romans, hardened by years of combat from the far corners of the empire, were not so easily cowed. Suetonius Paulinus, in turn, rallied his men, reminding them of their invulnerable armor, their well-honed tactics, and the humiliations they had already suffered at the rebels' hands. There could be no retreat, no surrender. The legionaries were entirely focused on the fight, spurred on by the knowledge that losing here would mean the entire province collapsing. With final orders issued, the stage was set for the clash that would decide the fate of Britain. The Britons, confident in their overwhelming numbers, surged forward in a wave of furious energy. The sheer force of their war cry must have shaken the air. But as they sprinted across the plain, Roman discipline asserted itself. At just the right moment, Roman soldiers hurled their pila. Javelin after javelin soared through the sky, raining down on the packed ranks of the advancing Britons. The front lines of Boudicca's forces took a brutal toll as men fell beneath the weighted iron. The impetus of the Britons' charge faltered. Then came the second volley, as more javelins were thrown with lethal precision. Chaos erupted in the rebel ranks, with wounded warriors stumbling, making it more difficult for those behind to maintain momentum. Yet the Britons pressed on, and soon the lines crashed together in close combat. Here is where Roman training and discipline shone. The legionaries fought in compact formation, each man covering the next with their shield, thrusting forward with the short sword designed for such tight engagements. In contrast, many British warriors wielded longer swords that required space to swing. Crowded by their own ranks, pinned by the narrow battlefield, they found it harder to bring their numerical advantage to bear. Roman officers barked commands, and the legions pushed forward in a wedge formation, cleaving into the mass of Britons with mechanical efficiency. Though the Britons fought valiantly, spurred on by their cause and their queen, they struggled to form a coherent front in the funnel-like terrain. Then came the turning point. The Roman formation began to advance steadily, forcing the Britons back. In the confusion of retreat, Some rebels found themselves blocked by the ring of wagons behind them, where their families and camp followers had gathered to witness the victory they had so confidently anticipated. This unfortunate positioning trapped the Britons, compressing them into an even tighter space. Panic set in as the Roman machine continued its inexorable march forward. The once unstoppable rebel horde became a chaotic mass, with the front lines pressed back against the wagons and those still trying to fight. The Roman cavalry, fewer in number than the Britons' chariots, launched coordinated charges on the flanks, further disorganizing the rebels. Bit by bit, the Britons' formation collapsed, and what had begun as a fearsome charge transformed into a desperate attempt to escape. The Romans showed little mercy, striking down warriors left and right, seizing the advantage offered by Boudicca's cramped baggage train. Trapped, demoralized, and now thoroughly outmaneuvered, thousands of Britons fell that day. Blood soaked the ground, and the air filled with the screams of the dying and the clash of weapons. Among the Roman ranks, the legionaries maintained their discipline. They were no strangers to brutal warfare, but what took place at Watling Street was particularly savage. By the time the sun set, the once mighty rebel host lay shattered. Men, women, and possibly even children perished in the chaos. The scope of Roman reprisal was fearsome, designed to send a clear message to any tribe considering further rebellion. Rome would not be expelled from Britain. Some accounts claim that Boudicca herself, upon realizing the magnitude of the defeat, took poison rather than fall into Roman hands. Others suggest she escaped only to die of illness soon after. The historical record is unclear, but what is certain is that she never again threatened Roman power in Britain. For Rome, the victory at Watling Street was total, ensuring that the province would remain in imperial hands for centuries. In the aftermath, the Romans reorganized their administration, adopting somewhat more moderate policies to prevent future insurrections on such a scale. For the Britons, however, the dream of a united front driving out the Romans lay in ruins along that now infamous road. Yet Boudicca's legacy endured. Her rebellion, though ultimately unsuccessful in its military objectives, became a symbol of defiance and the quest for freedom. Generations later, historians, artists, and the general public would romanticize her story, seeing in her the embodiment of Britain's unwavering spirit. The memory of the warrior queen leading her people against a seemingly invincible empire never truly faded. In modern times, statues and literary works celebrate her as a national icon, a testament to the capacity for resistance even when the odds appear insurmountable. But as one sifts through the aftermath of the battle, one must ask, could it have gone differently? Had Boudicca chosen more open ground or waited for even greater numbers, might she have overwhelmed the legions? Perhaps. Yet Suetonius Paulinus and his subordinates were not green recruits. They were masters of the Roman style of war, adept at turning tight situations to their advantage. The exact location of the battleground, carefully selected to negate the rebels' strength, speaks volumes about the Roman approach. Logistics, discipline, and unwavering fortitude trumped raw numbers and anger. The moral for future ages is clear. Strategy can defeat even the largest force if it lacks coordination. Watling Street itself was, and remains in some form to this day, a crucial artery in England's landscape. The very road that bore witness to such massive bloodshed is now traversed by cars and pedestrians, many of whom remain unaware of the cataclysmic events that took place there nearly 2,000 years ago. The soil beneath has absorbed the echoes of swords clashing on shields, the thunder of chariots, and the cries of warriors fighting for their homeland's independence. Such historic echoes can still stir the imagination. Even though the exact spot of the conflict remains lost to time, the significance of this confrontation echoes through the centuries. The battle was not merely a showdown between Boudicca's warriors and the Roman legions, but a collision of two worlds. On the one hand stood the indigenous tribes, anchored in centuries of tradition, worshipping in sacred groves, guided by druids, and organized by familial ties and tribal loyalty. On the other stood the Roman Empire, a juggernaut of administrative efficiency, military discipline, and ruthless ambition. Rome brought roads, aqueducts, and sprawling architecture, symbols of progress to some, instruments of oppression to others. When these worlds collided, the spark of conflict was perhaps inevitable. What remains astounding is the sheer scale of Boudicca's uprising, the near collapse of Roman governance in the province, and the final climactic act along Watling Street that reasserted Rome's dominance. Rome's response in the months and years following the battle was multifaceted. On one hand, the administration recognized that extremist policies and oppressive taxation had stoked the flames of rebellion. The Emperor Nero, upon hearing of the near disaster in Britain, considered withdrawing entirely. But the cost in terms of lost prestige was deemed too high. The empire chose instead to entrench itself more firmly, while instructing its officials to govern with a slightly lighter hand. Although the harshness of Roman rule remained, some concessions were made to avoid provoking another large-scale revolt. The British tribes that remained, those that had not been entirely crushed, found themselves forced to work within the Roman system. Over time, roads and trade opened up the land, forging a new identity that merged native and Roman elements. Still, the story of Boudicca's revolt and the Battle of Watling Street resonates for its timeless themes: the underdog's resistance against overwhelming might, the role of identity and tradition in forging alliances, and the question of how far people are willing to go to defend their sovereignty. It reminds us that injustice, left to fester, can explode into spectacular violence. It also cautions that sheer fury, without careful strategy, can lead to devastating defeat. For centuries, historians and scholars have debated the accuracy of Roman sources like Tacitus and Cassius Dio, who often had their own agendas when describing Britain's barbarians. But even through their biases, one can glean the awe they felt at the scale of the rebellion. That awe is inextricably tied to Boudicca's name, which has come down through time as a rallying cry for defiance in the face of tyranny. Through the centuries following this cataclysm, Britain remained a part of the Roman Empire for hundreds of years, steadily absorbing Roman ways. Villas were constructed, trade boomed, and major urban centers thrived under Roman governance. But never again would there be a rebellion to match Boudicca's in sheer scale. The memory of that conflagration and the utter destruction of cities like Camulodunum and Londinium served as a potent warning. Legends grew around Boudicca's final stand and her tragic end. Later British rulers, in medieval times, sometimes claimed descent or inspiration from her, using her story to validate their own authority as protectors of the land. In the Victorian era, Boudicca was mythologized as a symbol of British patriotism, her statue erected near the Houses of Parliament in London, capturing the Queen in her war chariot, forever defiant. Today, historians continue to analyze the sources, weigh the archaeological evidence, and debate where exactly that final stand took place. While theories place the battle anywhere from the Midlands near Manchester to further southeast near St. Albans or even London, the true site remains elusive. Yet, the power of the story does not hinge on exact coordinates. It rests on the undeniable reality that a massive Briton uprising almost succeeded in sweeping Rome from the island, and that a single disciplined legionary force under a tenacious commander managed to turn the tide. The clash continues to be studied for its lessons in military tactics, Boudicca's reliance on momentum and numerical superiority, Paulinus's exploitation of terrain and tight formation, and the resulting outcome that showcases the efficacy of Roman warfare. Beyond the battlefield, the tale of Watling Street captures the imagination as a testament to how deeply people value their freedom and identity. In many ways, it stands as a parable of colonial encounters throughout history where indigenous populations rise against occupying powers only to be met with the harsh reality of advanced militaries and political might. It is a cycle repeated in countless lands, yet rarely does one encounter a figure as iconic as Boudicca leading the charge. Her mark on cultural memory proves how a single personality can galvanize an entire populace and pose a genuine threat to one of the most formidable empires in human history. If you were a traveler on the roads of Roman Britain after the battle, you might have seen surviving Britons mourning their dead, entire regions still recovering from the scorched ruins of once thriving towns. You might also have encountered Roman soldiers, weary but prideful, confident in their legionary prowess. Perhaps Roman merchants would have spoken in hushed tones of the queen who nearly ended everything. For those living in the immediate aftermath, the event was no myth. It was a grim reality that changed the island's future. Over time, memory turned to legend, and legend to story, told around hearth fires, in monastic scribes' writings, and eventually in the pages of modern history books. Though the rebels lost, the values they fought for have echoed across generations. The sense of cultural pride and the desire for self-determination remain universal. Boudicca's name is invoked in the same breath as other great leaders who fought imperial power, and her spirit of defiance continues to inspire. The fact that she made such an indelible impression on Roman history, written mostly by Rome's own historians, speaks volumes about the magnitude of the revolt. Rarely did Rome face an uprising that nearly unraveled its grip so comprehensively. The shockwaves of the insurrection prompted immediate administrative changes and left a cautionary tale that reverberated into subsequent decades. As for Suetonius Paulinus, his victory at Watling Street was as much about survival as it was about triumph. Though lauded as the savior of Roman Britain, he found himself in a precarious position post-victory. His methods considered too harsh by some, including certain Roman officials who worried about inciting further revolt. The Emperor Nero, ever mercurial, wavered on how best to handle the British situation. Ultimately, Paulinus was replaced by a more conciliatory figure, but his martial success at Watling Street remains one of the most decisive Roman victories in the annals of British history. Understanding the magnitude of that clash also helps illustrate Rome's broader dilemma in maintaining a far-flung empire. Provinces had to be subdued, not only militarily but also politically and culturally. Failure to honor local customs or provide fair governance risked sparking yet another revolt. Although Boudicca's uprising was the most famous, It was far from the only resistance Rome faced in its many provinces, but few revolts seared themselves into the popular imagination as vividly as Boudicca's. A fierce queen, brutal oppression, the burning of Roman cities, and a final confrontation that shaped the destiny of a country. These elements combine to create one of antiquity's most gripping sagas. In recounting the events leading up to and culminating in the Battle of Watling Street, we pay homage to both the unstoppable force of native defiance and the immovable object of Roman discipline. It is a story that resonates even in our modern age, reminding us that when cultural identity and collective frustration coalesce behind a compelling leader, extraordinary feats can be accomplished, albeit sometimes at a devastating cost. As you reflect on this epic showdown, consider how the story reverberates in the broader tapestry of human struggles for self-determination, and how vital leadership, strategy, and the will of the people are in shaping history. The British tribes may have lost on that day, but their sacrifice left a legacy that endures, a testament to the power of conviction. We have reached the conclusion of this retelling of the Battle of Watling Street, but the echoes of that moment continue to resound through time. Even now, you can walk parts of Watling Street and imagine the thunderous roar of chariots, the clash of swords, and the defiant cry of a queen refusing to bow to an empire. Boudicca's tragedy reminds us that freedom is precious and precarious, often requiring tremendous sacrifice. She may have been defeated, but in memory, she remains undefeated, the eternal symbol of a free spirit challenging the strongest empire on earth. And so we honor the courage of the British tribes and acknowledge the ruthless power of the Roman legions in a story that shaped the very essence of Britain's heritage. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of one of antiquity's most dramatic confrontations. If this story has stirred your curiosity, keep exploring the annals of Roman Britain. You will find a tapestry of heroes and villains, triumphs and tragedies, each a thread that weaves together the epic saga of humanity's constant struggle for power, identity, and belonging. May the lessons of Watling Street guide us to remember that every age has its oppressors and its champions, its roads of destiny and its fields of final reckoning. We hope you enjoyed delving into the passions and perils that shaped the era. It is a stark reminder that history is neither distant nor irrelevant. Instead, it is the beating heart of our collective memory, offering us insights into who we are, where we come from, and the paths we might choose in the future. Always remember that the acts of a determined few, embodied by Boudicca and her allies, can ripple across centuries, challenging us to fight for what we hold dear and to learn from the triumphs and mistakes of the past. As we conclude, we invite you to reflect on Boudicca's journey, from a queen humiliated and enraged by Roman injustices to a leader who galvanized an entire region. Her story speaks to the resilience that resides in all who dare to stand up for their people and their beliefs. Though the Roman Empire emerged victorious in that final bloody battle, the moral and cultural victory remains hotly debated. After all, no empire lasts forever, but the spark of rebellion and hope in the hearts of the oppressed endures through time. Thank you for watching, and we hope this deep dive into the Battle of Watling Street, 61 AD, leaves you with a richer appreciation for the drama that played out on British soil so long ago. If you enjoyed this exploration of ancient history, consider sharing it with fellow history enthusiasts, and stay tuned for more stories that continue to shape our understanding of the past. and ourselves. Never forget that behind every famous event lies a tapestry of human experiences. The roads we walk every day might have once been the stage for unimaginable heroism, brutality, and determination. So, let Boudicca and her rebel warriors guide you in your own quest for truth and justice, and let the echo of Roman discipline remind you that structure and cohesion can overcome even the greatest threats. The Battle of Watling Street stands as a testament to the crossroads where two worlds collided in a fiery crucible of destiny, forever altering the course of British history. We hope this retelling illuminated the people, the places, and the passions that made this struggle legendary. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. May the lessons learned from the clash of Boudicca and Rome continue to inspire you to seek knowledge, challenge the status quo, and respect the power of unity.